Welcome back in a moment, our roundtable. But first, I recently sat down with Majority Whip Congressman James Clyburn to get his take on the Democrats' future after Tuesday. Congressman, thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you so much.
Glad to have you here. Let's talk a little bit about, in a couple of days, people will go to the polls. It seems, if numbers are to be believed, that you will be ushered in once again. I know you don't count your chickens before they hatch, but no. I think it's a fair bet. If I'm a betting man, I'm going to put it on you. But other Democrats are having, quite frankly, the scrap of their lives to a great degree. How surprising is this to you if you were to go back 2 years ago with what many saw as a mandate to the Democrats?
Well, it's not surprising to me at all. This is history here. It always happens. No matter what the mandate may seem to be, once the president gets in office, expectations are sometimes too great. And that party always, I think there's been only 2 exceptions in history when it did not occur that the party in the White House lost seats in the off-year elections. And so we expect for tradition to hold here. But now, when it comes to maintaining the majority, believe it or not, I see it very clearly that I think we are going to maintain the majority in both the House and the Senate.
History will also suggest, while you are absolutely correct, the House not in party typically, or not in the seat of the presidency, typically gains some seats. There are losing seats, and there are truly losing seats, if you know the difference of the nuance there. What went wrong to some degree? There had to have been some missteps by Democrats to have the majority that you had and to lose the number of seats that are projected that you will lose.
Well, we aren't going to lose the seats that are projected.
You don't buy that at all. You don't buy
I don't buy
numbers.
that at all. Absolutely not. The fact of the matter is, if you ask what went wrong was 8 years of a failed policy that crashed the economy of this country. You had 8 years of George Bush. You elected President Obama for a 4-year term. We're less than 2 years into the term. Nobody gives up before the halftime. He will not get to the halftime of his term until this coming January. And so to chalk up the score before the halftime as if this is what the end result will be, is not what we're all about as a people. You have to stay engaged in this process. These things don't happen all in one fell swoop. I would love for them to. My goodness, I've got people in my congressional district that I want to see in much better shape than they are today. But I can tell you this, they are better off today than they were 2 years ago. This country is better off today than it was 2 years ago. Every single American in this country is better off today than they were 2 years ago because the opportunities. Let's look at the health care bill. My Lord, until September 23rd, a child born with diabetes could never get health insurance. Until September 23rd this year, because of what we did with health care, an insurance company could kick you off your policy once you got sick. We outlawed all of that, and that's outlawed for the entire United States of America. So we are better off today with health care.
All right. Congressman Clyburn, always good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being a part of the program today.
Thank you.
All right, let's turn our attention now to the roundtable. Joining us today, Democratic Congresswoman from New York, Yvette Clarke, Tara Setmeyer, Communications Director for Republican Representative Dana Rohrabacher, and contributing editor and columnist for Newsweek magazine, Ellis Coates. I welcome you all, greatly appreciate it. Ellis, let me turn to you.
Sure.
We just heard from the Majority Whip suggest that everyone in this country is better off than they are 2 years ago. Now, we understand political hyperbole, and that is used in this season quite a bit.
That's simple nonsense. Everyone's not better off. I mean, obviously, we're still, well, officially this recession is over, but we still have unemployment, particularly in the black community, around 10%. I mean, we have unprecedented levels of unhappiness across the board in a number of measures. So it's just nonsense that everybody's better off.
Well, obviously the poll numbers beg to differ, which is why we're seeing such a wave, such a backlash, particularly with independents. They are hemorrhaging support for the president and his policies because they are not working. The stimulus package has not worked. We've lost 2.2 million jobs since the stimulus package was signed into law. Nobody's saying that we shouldn't have done anything, but spending over
Still
$1 trillion.
Let's be fair on that number, though.
Yeah.
Still a lesser decline in the numbers that we're losing prior to the stimulus package.
This
yeah.
is true.
Okay,
but
so let's just make sure that we
absolutely. But we're talking about whether the stimulus was working or not. It's tough to say that it's working when we're still hemorrhaging jobs.
Certainly working better than have done nothing. Now, whether they should have done more. Now, Republicans think it should have done less. That's a whole different discussion.
What do you tell someone? What do you tell someone in your district who's already been off of work for 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, facing foreclosure? Just hang on a little bit longer.
It's not even just a hang on a little bit longer. There's a lot that has been put into the pipeline that is just about to come into fruition.
But how do you convince them to hang on until it comes in?
Well, they recognize that we're all in this together, and that they elected President Obama to make the dramatic changes that need to be made, and that those changes are now in the pipeline. He had 8 years of Bush administration policies that drove us into that. And the reality is that the majority of people in this nation and in my district recognize that it's not going to happen overnight. It took 8 years to drive our economy into the ground, and we're on
to
the
Tara's point, though, I don't know that we can.
Around.
I don't know that we can fairly say that the majority of people understand that. You would hope that the majority, perhaps, of his supporters.
I think she is right. The majority of people do understand this is not going to be turned around overnight. I think that much is true. But I don't think that translates into a huge amount of enthusiasm for this presidency right now, and that's the problem. I mean, the problem. There was just a story this week in the New York Times talking about the frame, the coalition that brought Obama to power. I think that he did set up very high expectations. They were unrealistic from the beginning. They were unrealistic. No one takes the worst economy in our lifetime and turns it around overnight. No one takes 2 simultaneous wars and ends them overnight. No one takes these long-term patterns.
Was that the biggest misstep to date of his presidency, the idea that he did not perhaps manage expectation as he should have?
I think that he had to set high expectations, but I think once he got elected, she should have been a lot more upfront about what he was doing and how he was doing it.
How do you explain the idea that it seems to me that at this point Republicans have taken the idea that we're not going to play? We're going to make everything difficult for you, and you're not going to win in spite of.
Because there are certain aspects that I think are non-negotiable, and spending our country into oblivion, which is what is happening, is non-negotiable. So now, should there be? Do we need to compromise on some things? Do we need to work together on some things? Yes. But when we tried to do that, when it came to health care, that didn't happen. Health care wasn't passed with Republican support at all.
Yeah, well, Republicans never came to the table.
Yes, we did. We weren't allowed.
They never came to the table.
We weren't allowed. Your side wouldn't
allow us. No need to debate the
but I'm just saying that
before.
But that's the dynamic that we're dealing with.
We can clearly say that this has been a session, 111th Congress session of Republican no.
But you all faltered to a great degree as Democrats, Congresswoman. You all faltered because you had numbers. You couldn't figure out how to walk in lockstep to move things that you could have moved without Republicans on board.
We did. No, just about everything we moved, we did without Republicans on board.
Isn't the problem, though, that
the
those
problem
things that
is that there was no compromise on the Republican. Their strategy going into this session was to make sure that whatever was put forth, whether it was good for the country or not, that there was a no, that it would have a poor reflection on a president that reached out across the aisle.
I will say that there were things that did move without Republicans on board, but what they weren't is impactful enough immediately to move the public. Is that fair?
I think that's absolutely true. And I mean, I think the Democrats had somewhat of a problem, which is that they don't have the same kind of discipline as the Republicans had. Yeah, and that showed.
We're much more diverse.
But it's amazing.
The Republican Party is. But the Republican Party is not as diverse.
How can you blame?
Going back to the point, though, first for a moment, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were not in a deficit position. That was under a Democratic administration. So we got into that under Republican administration. So for Republicans to say this is the president who got us into this deficit position, it's just simply dishonest.
We'll be back right after.